All right, let's dive into a really fascinating historical puzzle. It's a story about a scientific golden age that led to a revolution that, well, never actually happened. We're talking about China, and it's a heck of a story.
So here's the big question, the one that keeps historians up at night. For centuries, China was without a doubt a global scientific powerhouse. So why? Why did the scientific revolution, that massive shift in thinking, ignite in Europe and not in China?
You know, to even start to unpack that question, we first have to get our heads around just how advanced China really was. It's easy to forget, but for a huge chunk of history, we're talking about the world's undisputed scientific and technological superpower.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture Europe during its medieval period. You know, castles, knights, feudal lords. Now, at that same time, China was just operating on a totally different level. Its whole society, its whole economy was in so many ways way more rational and, frankly, more advanced.
And this is a huge deal. For 2,000 years, the Chinese state was basically a meritocracy. A massive civil service, the mandarinate, pulled in the best and brightest minds from all over the country through this incredibly tough exam system. Compare that to Europe, where, for the most part, you got power because your dad had it. It's a completely different way of running a country.
And if you want a sense of the economy this system built, look at this number, 5 billion. At its peak under the Northern Sung dynasty, that's how many bronze coins they were minting, every single year. I mean, that points to an economy so vibrant and massive, it was just unheard of in the West back then.
And it didn't stop there. Centuries, literally centuries, before Europe got the idea, China introduced what they called flying money. Yep, the world's very first national paper currency. It's a concept that feels so modern it's almost hard to believe.
Even on the battlefield, Chinese tech was a complete game changer. The crossbow, for example, totally flipped the script. See, in Europe, the heavily armored knight was king. But in China, a peasant with a good crossbow could take down a feudal lord. That's not just a technological advantage, that has massive social consequences.
So what we have are these two incredibly powerful civilizations, but they're built on completely different blueprints. And as we're about to see, those different social structures sent them down two totally separate paths when it came to understanding the natural world.
Our source material actually has a name for the Chinese system, bureaucratic feudalism. Now, the key word there is bureaucratic. It's this rational, organized system based on merit that's running the show, not the military or aristocratic families you saw in Europe.
And this just lays it out perfectly, right? On one side, you have a system trying to find the best brains in the entire nation and put them to work. On the other, you have a system where it's all about who your father was. This difference wasn't just about politics. It shaped everything right down to the way they thought about reality itself.
So out of this organized bureaucratic society came a worldview that was deeply organic. It didn't see these hard lines between, say, spirit and matter. Instead, the universe was seen as this giant interconnected web. Everything was related, everything resonated with everything else, and you had to try and understand it as a whole.
And this is where it gets really interesting. This is the point in history where these two worlds finally collide, and we can actually start to measure the gap between them. Historians have a name for it, the Great Divergence.
So, as Jesuit missionaries start bringing European science and math to China, something amazing starts to happen. It's not just a one-way transfer of information. The two systems begin to fuse together. But, and this is the fascinating part, the speed at which they fused tells you everything you need to know about how different they were.
Okay, check this out. Look at math and physics. The two traditions basically fused into one global science in about 30 years. That's incredibly fast. But then look at botany, a much more complex organic science. That fusion took over 100 years. And medicine, the most holistic of them all? The source argues that fusion still isn't complete even today.
Now, seeing this data led the author of our source, Joseph Needham, to come up with a theory. He called it the law of oecumenogenesis. I know it's a mouthful, but the idea is actually pretty simple. The more organic and complex a science is, the longer it takes for different cultures to merge their ideas into one. The simple mechanical stuff fused in a snap. The complex living stuff took way, way longer.
So what does all this mean? Where does it leave us with our big question? Well, it kind of forces us to take a step back and ask, what even is science? Is it really Eastern or Western, or is it something much bigger? A universal science for all of humanity?
And there's this one perfect little story that captured this idea. In 1669, when Jesuits showed their latest mathematical work to the Emperor Kangxi, he made a very specific edit. He insisted they call it the new method, and he crossed out the words Western method.
Think about that. With this incredible foresight, the emperor realized that what the Jesuits were bringing wasn't some uniquely Western thing, it was just new. This experimental way of doing science was just as new to Europe as it was to China.
And that right there is the big takeaway. Maybe we've been asking the wrong question all along. Maybe the real split isn't between Eastern science and Western science. Maybe the real revolution was the jump from ancient ways of thinking to the modern experimental method, creating a single, universal science that belongs to everyone.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. If modern science is just one really powerful lens for looking at the universe, what can we still learn from other lenses, from that holistic, organic worldview of ancient China? In our incredibly complex world today, what might we gain from embracing more than just one way of seeing the truth?